Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn. In today's episode, we're talking about the Zach Wilson trade to the Denver Broncos. Today's going to be a little bit of a redux in terms of my Zach Wilson profiles. Originally, I had graded him out as a 89 percentile career quarterback score player. And a lot of that is because I had a cutoff in my system that cut quarterbacks off who didn't play 9 games in their season. But with Wilson's case, he had 2 seasons where he played 9 games straight, and then he had some injuries here and there that kind of prevented him from starting more games. So he legitimately had about 3 seasons worth of data in his profile that I missed. That's my bad. But I do want to do a redux on him because he has been traded to the Denver Broncos. And we're going to look at what his pre draft profile was like, what were some of his comparisons, and what should be expected of him in the future. Because I think there was a lot of high expectations on Wilson that his data profile didn't really warrant. I mean, I originally had him graded out as a risky pick because of only having 1 season of more than 9 starts in his career. At the time, I didn't account for his other starts before that, but I had him as a risky, in sort of the Mitch Trubisky-ish range in terms of his profile. But stay tuned into the end of the video where we're going to get to what his outlook might be like on the Denver Broncos. But we're going to look at his pre-draft profile. So first off, taking a look at the mobile quarterback score in terms of quarterbacks, this takes a look at their ability to rush as a quarterback. And surprisingly, Zach Wilson actually had a pretty good mobile quarterback score overall. His overall score was in the 80 percentile range, which is pretty decent. Again, he wasn't like a crazy, ridiculous quarterback in terms of his feet, but he did make enough plays. He was able to get touchdowns with his feet. He was able to, get decent yards per touch on the ground. So from that perspective, he was mobile. He's not a quarterback who has to stay in the pocket. He can run and get outside the pocket and make, some plays with his legs, if you will. Now, getting to the quarterback scores. So the quarterback scores takes a look at their passing efficiency. And this is the area where I kind of goofed a little bit. Zach Wilson's original career score I had is an 89.34 out of 100 because the only score I had for him was his final season at BYU in 2021. Going back and adding in the 9 games he played in 2018 and 2019, I was able to compile those scores and get a career score of 68.47 out of 100. That's a big difference. When you look at the starter averages and the Pro Bowl averages, he wasn't quite near those areas, which makes his selection in the top 2 of the NFL draft a little precarious to say the least. Now, when you get to his actual comparisons as a quarterback, though, so when I adjusted his PEAV or his pocket approximate value score, which is what the PEAV score is, and compared it to other quarterbacks in that similar range of possibilities, he was with a decent number of starters. Cordell Stewart, Trent Dilfer, Danny White, Russell Wilson, Joe Burrow. Tyree Jackson hasn't really done much. Sean King has been kind of here and there, but when you look at the list here, it's not a bad bunch of quarterbacks to be with. It really isn't for him. Now, obviously, he's not quite as experienced as these other quarterbacks, and the biggest reason why he's even with this group of players is because of his age. I mean, Zach Wilson has always been a very young prospect, so he had that sort of upside that hey, he's a very good quarterback in terms of passing efficiency, and he'll develop at the next level. That's kind of what you were betting on with Zach Wilson from a developmental standpoint. But when you actually look at his NFL production, scary. As you can see, in 2021, he had what you would expect out of a 22-year-old rookie. 2022, he had a little bit better in terms of improving overall, and then in 2023, of course, after Aaron Rodgers bit the dust, that was pretty much it for him. He pretty much had a very similar season to what he had as a rookie. And because of this, people have kind of written him off. That Zach Wilson is terrible. He's a terrible quarterback. People have even compared J.J. McCarthy to Zach Wilson as sort of an example, like, hey, don't take the quarterback that looks like him, kind of preppy looking guy, if you will, uh, those types of things. But I would say this about Zach Wilson. Taking a look at his pre-draft profile, we know what he tested like pre-draft. He never should have been the second overall pick. I mean, that was very clear based on his data. If I had the information I had today back then, if I hadn't made that mistake, I would have definitely of said no, 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 don't take this guy, second overall. But as a developmental quarterback, as a quarterback that, yes, his passing efficiency wasn't the best in terms of his career at BYU, in terms of his career scores, but the upside is there. The upside is there. There is that potential there. Again, the vast majority of NFL starters typically scored between 60 and above in terms of their career quarterback scores. So from that standpoint, thinking about it from that standpoint, he's in a group of guys where there is a potential that he could develop into a starter. The problem is the Broncos roster isn't much better than the Jets. I hate to tell this to you guys, but I mean the Jets roster is really not as good as a lot of people hype it up to be. I know there was a lot of injuries, there was a lot of issues here and there, but the overall what the Jets have actually brought to the table as a team has not been there. There's a lot of wishful thinking when it comes to the Jets in terms of their entire offense. The defense a little bit less. I mean, their defense is a little bit stronger than their offense, but there's a lot of wishful thinking there. This team is really not as good as people think they are. I might eat these words, but it's just because there's a lot of players on that team that really haven't lived up to their draft status. There's a lot of players on that team that haven't lived up to the hype that they've received. You have a couple good games here and there, and then now all of a sudden you're a world beater. I mean, come on, guys, that's not how it works. So you take Zach Wilson and you put him into a very similar situation on the Broncos, where they don't have that great of an offense. They don't have a lot of great offensive weaponry. Uh, again, I think the Jets obviously have some better wide receivers here and there, but overall, he's going into almost a worse situation with the Broncos. But I understand the thinking with this trade. The thinking is this: the Broncos may not come out of this draft with a quarterback, or at the very least, they may not come out of this draft with the quarterback that they want, because most of the quarterbacks, how I see it, are going to be gone by pick 3 to 4, um, in that sort of range, if you will, the top 10. If the Broncos are not able to get into the top 10 of this particular draft class, barring some unforeseen event where a team passes on a quarterback and just lets them fall, I could see the Broncos missing out if they're not able to get that deal done, which is very possible. So this is kind of insurance. It's like, hey, let's kick the tires on this guy. If we don't come out of this draft with a quarterback, maybe we can get something out of Zach Wilson, and kind of see where it goes. And again, his profile wasn't that terrible. It wasn't that terrible of a profile, but he does need development. He does need to have a decent team around him, and I don't think that the Broncos really are the better situation here. So I don't really expect much out of this trade, but that's kind of Zach Wilson in a nutshell. I think there is no way to determine if he'll really be able to recover from the years of shame and abuse he faced on the Jets. I mean, we'll see. But that's kind of what this trade feels like from a data perspective, is that you bring him in, you kind of kick the tires on him, see what's going on. Maybe he develops into a starter, maybe he doesn't, but you still didn't have a quarterback to begin with. So it's just insurance. Because the biggest thing I can say about this particular draft class is that there really isn't any room for a quarterback to fall to somebody, because multiple teams painted themselves into a corner to have to take a quarterback in this particular draft class. You look at the Bears. They traded away their quarter. They literally traded away the top guy on their team to somebody else so that they would have to take a quarterback at one. Similar situation with the Washington Commanders. Similar situation with the New England Patriots. Similar situation with the Las Vegas Raiders, even the Denver Broncos. So all these teams are putting themselves in a situation where they have to take a quarterback, and there's limited supply. There just isn't enough quarterbacks to meet that expectation. So I feel like this is very interesting. This is a very interesting draft from an economic. If you look at the quarterbacks as uh, quarterback economics situation here, this is why this trade makes sense. Is because there's a chance that the Broncos are not going to get out of this quarterback. They're not going to get out of this draft with the quarterback that they want. So if that's the case, maybe see what you got in Zach Wilson, because it probably will cost way too much to get into the top 10 to take the quarterback that you want, that is your guy. And maybe you just sit on Zach Wilson, see how it goes, maybe get another chance to draft somebody next year, if you will, and kind of go from there. Because the Broncos roster is not that great. The Jets roster is depth wise a lot of unproven wishful thinking, like I stated. So but those are my two thoughts. So that was this trade in a nutshell in terms of my overall outlook on it from a data perspective. I really don't know what to expect. Most likely, probably nothing exciting. Again, he's been terrible for 3 years based on his statistics, but maybe there's a change of scenery that could change things around here for him. Kind of see what goes on with that. But with all that stuff out of the way, check out these videos right here if you want to. Also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. Check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account, at Geometrics, and purchase the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide. Link is in the description if you want to see data profiles on this particular draft class. It's going to have all the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive linemen, defensive players, all those types of guys are going to be there. It's a great guide. It's probably the best guide that I've ever produced up to this point, and I definitely think you guys should buy it and see it and cherish it for years to come. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.